Oh, we have a whole bunch of different openers for all of you who missed the action here. So, hey, everyone, Richard Carlton here, creator of FMTrain.tv, where we do great FileMaker training. We have all sorts of openers, including the one where he's applying for the job at Claris. That's a funny one, too. I don't know if you've seen that one, Christian. That's really funny.
That's the second one I've seen from TK, and
Yeah, that was the first one. So welcome to FM Training. We do lots of great FileMaker training stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here real quick and pop my browser. And I'm going to briefly cover Christian because he's really not that kind of important kind of guy. I'm going to go to fmtrain.tv. You can see the website right here. Christian's still down the bottom. And you can go to the live streaming right here, and you can see the upcoming broadcast. So you go to fmtrain.tv. FM stands for FileMaker. Woo! That's your little hot tip for the day for those of you who haven't seen that one. And today is Painting Yourself into Corner Part 2. And then tomorrow is the first day. We have 2 days on the new version of FileMaker. It's spread out. Tomorrow's kind of like the README and the kind of a conversation with Jacob Taylor. And it'll be very educational because about the time you think I'm not technical enough, then someone like Jacob walks in, your little heads will explode. So they're going to talk about that. And then Christian will be talking about the gold coin action next week. I think it's Thursday next week. And that's where you're going to be going through, or no, is it 2 weeks?
Yeah, you keep saying Thursday, but I think it's a week from Monday, the April 12th.
Oh, is that April 12th? I'm sorry. So, yeah, so that's coming up. So that's like part 2. It's the secret gold coins that were put in there by FileMaker for intermediate and advanced developers. I think Christian was very excited to talk about the gold coins. So Claris hasn't talked about the gold coins too much. They kind of expect everyone to use, mental telepathy to understand the little, tiny, small font print on the README and understand the strategic galactic implications of that. And there are galactic implications. So something else to consider. For those of you who have discretionary training funds, which is not most of the people here, but you should be aware of this. If you go to fm-neo, if it's hard to spell, it's morphism.com. Oh, that didn't work. NEU. Sorry, I got to do this right. NEU. We're going to put a link on the main site there. This is our Nick Hunter follow-up course. So this is paid training for those of you who have a training budget. A lot of you don't have a training budget. I totally understand that, but there's a limit of how much free stuff we can do because Nick doesn't want to go bankrupt and be unemployed. So given that, we are going to do an additional neomorphism follow-up course on these dates here, 14th, 15th, 16th, a little bit earlier in the day so it doesn't interfere with the actual broadcast, which is typically at 1 o'clock. And if you're interested in that, you can register and pay for it right there. So that's it for now. So Christian, are you ready to continue the conversation from yesterday?
I guess so.
Yeah, so we gave everyone a homework assignment. And the homework assignment was to watch those videos. I'm sure some people have not watched the videos, but one of the things we wanted to cover today, Christian, was the rules, the things that because you and I take a lot for granted because I've been doing this so long and you're such a fast learner. And then one of the things that I do, my job is to bestow upon the engineers who will listen at this company the things that I've learned along the way. And so they don't have to learn it all the hard way. I have a couple engineers who refuse to learn. It's like when you have your kid and they say it's a hot stove and the kid goes, I'm very smart, I'm brilliant, I'm smarter than you are. So they stick their finger on the hot stove and they burn it. And then they scream. And then a month later that's healed. And then they do it again and they do it 3 or 4 times. I have a couple engineers that are actually like that. We don't let them on the broadcast because I don't need them doing that on live TV. But Christian actually learns. It's great. So yesterday you indicated we had rules that we had learned. Have you thought about this at all anymore? Rules that we've learned from painting yourself into the corner?
Yeah, so yesterday, just as kind of a recap, we talked about, really big tables, not leveraging the relationship graph, unstored calculations being a sign of missing processes. And I had 2 items marked for today that we didn't get to. And while we were sitting here, I actually thought of a couple other things that we can dive into. And the first one, and before I jump into this, because I feel like this one in particular, people are going to raise their hands and go, wait, I use it in this way and it's totally fine. When you're learning English, one of the things that I think is really frustrating, especially grammar, is you learn rules and then you're told for every rule, here are all the exceptions. And so, I before E except when it's not.
After C.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so with a lot of these, that is true as well. And so I'll try to qualify, when to use or when not to. And this is also some of my own rules. So other qualified engineers might have different experiences than I do, and that's fine. But I'll give you guys some telltales that I've learned from. And so what I want to do is I'll use starting point here as an example, and I'll talk about two modules and how creating a type field has been useful and why, and where it has really painted me into a corner and I'm less likely to use it in the future. And so the first one, and Richard, you can definitely chime in because I'm sure you'll have some views on this. The first one is products.
Excuse me, I have to save that meme. That meme must be saved immediately.
Follow the rules.
Where's with the penguin. How do I save that? I mean, how do I say?
Well, I think where he's pointing needs to be an asterisk that it says accept.
Yeah, there you go.
So let's start with, and I don't know that I need to necessarily pull my screen up, but if you've used starting point, if you have any sort of sales system, if you can envision this, you might have a module. I'm going to call it product.
Show your screen. Don't be a wuss.
Okay, well,
God,
we're going to do it all off the cuff. That's probably better. I didn't prepare myself to be presented in the stream, so I like my screen better. We'll hide Discord, and what we're going to have to do? I'm going to have to make the monitor miserably unusable for me. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Perfect. So again, I'm going to start with where this works. And so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to open up my little folder here. I'm going to copy whatever version of starting point this is. Close that. Open it. I think this one throws out some error messages at me. Oh, beautiful. It didn't that time. All right. So we've got this products module over here. And if you've used starting point, if you've had something, we have products and we have services. And it makes sense keeping these both in the same table because when you're in an invoice or an estimate and you want to go sell something, you might have a portal, you might have a screen that comes up and you want to find these together in a single table. And so generally speaking, they lend themselves to working out in the same table with this differentiator. I'm this type of product, I'm this type of product, even though it's a service. Where this hasn't worked out so well for me is starting point has an accounts module. Yes. And generally speaking, the contacts are part of the account. And so somewhere over here, this is a slightly older version of starting points. Somewhere on here, we've got vendor. There we go, vendor. And the way starting point does this is it links it to the accounts table. And so with a lot of my clients, I'll say, hey, we can start out this way. But my experience over the last several years is when I use accounts as a vendors table, eventually I get into trouble. And part of that trouble comes from the fact that my accounts and my vendors start to interact with each other as different parts of the database. Like I might need to have a record that I relate both an account and a vendor to. I might start to need to have different layouts that show different fields for the accounts and vendors. And so when you go to accounts, you have a check. Is this an account or is it a vendor? If it's this one, hide these fields or go to this layout. And this is where the painting in the corner signs start to come from. Many videos ago, Nick had said something, I think it was on the stream, where he said, if you have a script where it seems like every single step is a if-this kind of situation, like we all use if and else ifs, but if every single thing is this condition, then you probably have a design issue. And in my own experience, when I try to break a table out to be two different things, eventually I get into some issues there. And again, one of the big telltales for me is, do those two entities interact with each other? Generally speaking, a product and a service don't interact with each other. You relate one or the other to an estimate and an invoice, but I'm not relating services to a product or products to a service. And again, this is where I would expect some people to kind of throw their hands in the air because they're going to say, but actually, Christian, I have a situation where I've been doing this and it works great. And that could absolutely be the case. This is not a hard, fast rule. And so at least with my own clients, I will frequently say, hey, look, we can use accounts for accounts and vendors for, I literally just did this with a new client. Let's do it for now. They're barely using the module and it tracks both for us. And I said, I just want you to be prepared. At some point down the road, I'm probably going to suggest that we separate these into two tables. I mean, Richard, do you have any comments or views on this with your own experience?
Well, not with this one, but what is that frequently even our own organization. So an account is supposed to be a non-living entity. It's an organization of some type, and these are typically some sort of living people or whatever. Maybe it's a favorite dog that buys things from you or whatever. Golden retrievers that buy snacks online from you. Whatever, these are some sort of living person customer. This accounts are supposed to be organizations. At RCC, for example, we have very few customer situations where we have like if you were selling something to, and I can pop myself back over here. If you were selling something to, for example, Walmart's a great example, or Amazon. Actually, Walmart would be a better one. Say you're shipping bags of lettuce or milk because we're a farm and we're going to Walmart. You would have relationships with a number of different people at Walmart, so it would make sense that you would have an account section over here, right? That makes sense. And then the people that you know at Walmart, so it'd be like Walmart, and then you'd have like all these people over here that you knew there. Well, at RCC, most of the time we have a primary contact and maybe a secondary contact. And so we don't actually use the accounts module, right? Because our business model, while we have 30 people, is sufficiently simple that we don't need an accounts module. So if we go over to contacts, we might find 2 people that work for Walmart and there'd be 2 records, right? So it's not such a thing that I really need to see, because I know like at Apple's kind of one of our outliers, right? Because Apple, we actually have done quite a bit of work at Apple. We know a lot of people at Apple. Never mind Claire, it's just Apple, right? And so I've got 50 or 60 people that we know at Apple, or more, actually more like thousands, right? And so the rub is it becomes this kind of like the one outlier. So do you build the system to deal with the one outlier, or do you build your system just to be generically useful? And in our case, we just don't deal with this because it's unnecessary complexity, and we know that most of the time we'll have 1 or 2 people from a company, and that's fine in the context table. Does that make sense? So it's one of those like you don't even, like as you're building the solution, you come at a starting point. We even have videos say, do you need both of these, or can you use one or the other, and can you get rid of one, right? It's up to you to decide that, right? It depends.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's fine. It's up to you to decide that. And I can't tell you. Now, if we start coaching with you, one of my coaches starts going, we could go one way or the other way, but it may become more apparently obvious. Like years ago, I did it this way just because I didn't know any better. Then I realized there was this other option. And some of my engineers went, we got to put an accounts module in our system. And I'm like, okay. They put it in there. We never used it. So when you build something and no one ever uses it, that's a clue that it wasn't needed, right? It's like if I put a rocket launcher on my minivan, right? How many times in traffic am I actually going to shoot a rocket launcher and blow up the people on the freeway? Probably not very often. So is it a needed feature on my vehicle? Probably not, right? So anyway, try to make it practical.
I really like how you put that there. Like, what is the need level? And so I'm going to use 2 clients as a prime example on this. Client number 1, I have several that fit into this. We had accounts for them because they actually track businesses and they need to track the people at the business. And then later on, as we built a purchase order module, and again, this applies to a few clients, we needed to track who the vendors were that were providing those items to them. And so we used accounts. It saved them time, and it got us up and moving in a useful fashion. And then over time, what happened is the utility of those modules grew, and they grew in different directions. And one of the issues we would have is we would have a purchase order or an invoice or a record where they had an account that was a customer and they had a vendor that it came from. And so, again, there are ways to solve this, and we did it for a while, but it started to create more problems than it was solving. And so at that point, by putting the 2 entities into 2 different tables, it just made things play nice. It's kind of like in starting point, generally speaking, all people live in contacts. It makes sense. This is a people's table. But what we also have in starting point is a staff table. And contacts and staff are both people, but by creating 2 different tables, you can kind of create this role or differentiation. I didn't say that correctly at all. And what's nice too then is connecting a contact and a staff to a record is much easier. Now, this new client that I have right now, and he's actually not very new, but we're going to start using vendors for the first time. And this client lives in the projects module. We're now for the first time ever using products. and estimates and invoices, though they look nothing like that. And in order to use those, he needs to have a list of vendors to assign to his components or his products. And this is important. But he very rarely, if ever, comes to the account screen and doesn't really care what that UI looks like right now. And the difference between his accounts and his vendors is so minimal that for me to argue that we need to go and separate the two would be a whole ton of work for him for something that he's not likely really ever going to see or use. But for my other client, it became a huge issue that when they went to accounts and they were going to list view or they're doing fines, and the two entities were getting mixed up with each other. And again, there's ways to solve this, but it was all kinds of scripts and checks and this and that to keep them separate. And then you've got two IDs that really relate back to the same table. So you've got two lookups from invoices to accounts, one based on ID account or one based on ID vendor, or you use a flag. Again, all these different things got created when just separating them into two tables suddenly just solved all the problems. Did UK Lad have a question there?
Well, I want to, yeah. So let me just jump over here real quick. So, yeah, I mean, so he's asking whether accounts was also thought as companies. Yeah, you can think of as companies, but then RCC also deals with nonprofits and schools and stuff like that. So then is companies a better name?
I've oftentimes will call it like an organization.
Organization, yeah, organizational. Accounts or organizations. So Kyle is saying, I've always seen people trying to, if I can pop back over here, let me do that. I'm going to minimize myself. Kyle goes, I've seen people trying to companies in the contacts module. There can be several contacts from one company, which is a little bit of a mess. It depends. In my company, it's not a mess, right? Because the way we operate, it's not a problem, Kyle.
But hang on that. We don't stick a company so much in contacts as we do many individuals with the same company.
We deal with people on an individual basis. We don't deal with.
I think Kyle is saying that someone would make a contact record for like RCC or Apple.
Because here's the other part of this that people. You know, I guess I should state this very obviously. So we're talking about the FileMaker platform every day at this live stream, 1 hour every day. Why are we here? Because FileMaker is an awesome platform. The product is really fantastic. One of the reasons it's so fantastic is that as you're exploring what your organization needs, FileMaker can grow organically with you. It means that as your needs change or as you have as your needs change or very deep thought here, as your understanding of your needs gets better, FileMaker can be adjusted. You can adjust a trajectory for it. A lot of data systems are not super flexible like that, right? For example, if you wanted to totally rewrite how Salesforce wanted to work, it would be a super bitch to do it if you could even do it. And so that's where a platform like FileMaker, you can still have interact with hundreds, if not thousands of people. If you have an organization that big, but the average, I remember at one point Claire said their actual install size was, I think between 5 and 10 was their actual install customer size. I think Claris would wish it was always, they only had like installs of 50 users, right? Because that's why they got rid of that 5-pack, right? You can't buy below a 5-pack because guess what? They don't want to sell anything for less than $900 or $1,000 per sale, right? They don't want to sell 2 packs for $399 or something. They just they don't want to, they want to target that higher end market, which of course causes PR issues. But the platform works good from one person all the way up to 3,000 or 4,000 at one time would be about the max I'd be comfortable with. Anything above that, you'd be in potentially in trouble. David says there's 2 tables viewed in a portal. Depends on use, virtual list. So you see the questions here, Christian? You got anything in here that you want to chime in on?
Yeah, so I didn't quite understand David's question at first. So I'm going to ask it, and I'm also going to give more context to people. So David's saying, okay, well, if you have two different tables, but you need to view them in a single portal, how would you accomplish this? And the easiest, the way that I'm most likely to do it is with a virtual list. Get the data from the 2 tables and then display it that way. You can't edit the information, but more and more so, I like how Nick does things where don't edit in the portal, go to the record or open a card window. So that's how I'd be likely to do that. And I think that kind of gets this heart too of knowing when to separate or not. In the book, one of the things that was really helpful to me when I read that a few years ago was this idea that tables are real world things, and then the fields are attributes of those things. And so my general rule with this whole type field is, does the entity interact with itself, if you will? So if account and vendors interact, I'm much more likely to separate them into two tables because they're two separate things now in the database. That's my general rule.
Yeah.
And it can create other issues. So that's where all this stuff can get a little hard. There are times when you want to jam things into two tables. For example, I really like the tree that I use where you kind of the folders and open up and close.
Yes.
And that is definitely creating a type field. That's a technique, by the way. Nick hates it. He hates it because of the support that goes into a feature like that. And that's one of the last things I think we can chat about today. Were there other questions on there? I suspect people maybe want us to move on to one of the next topics.
Yeah, I'm not particularly sure. Ruben says, Netherlands checking in. Hey, Ruben. So you kind of check in a couple different places, so welcome, as always, everyone else that's showing up. Yeah, so tomorrow is the conversation about the 19.2.2.3234 build of FileMaker, which has, we'll start to cover the topic on the gold coins a little bit. Christian, if you can serve us tomorrow during that, might be useful a little bit. So we're checking to see if that helps David. David, are we getting the question you want for that? That would be good. So yeah, I mean, a big part of this with the FileMaker platform is doing things so it helps the business. It's intuitive. So part of this conversation that we started off in is like when to break things into multiple tables. And then of course you get people, we've met people before who are like, oh, I want a flat file. Everything goes in one table. Literally, that's what they say. And for that, you can either use Excel or you can use potentially FileMaker version 2 if you can find that and get that installed. That's from 1990-91. FileMaker Pro 1, FileMaker Pro 2, flat file, and you could build everything in one table. People try to do that, and they get to a point where it works, and then it literally quits operating. The trick is to break things down logically, and once again, when they're personally invested in it, it's their baby, they built it, it works good enough for them. They sometimes get offended when you have to explain to them that you built this really nice basket of doo-doo, and you're having problems now, and the problems are only going to get worse as we go forward. When is a table too small? There is no such thing as a table too small. Just so you understand with the way FileMaker works, tables, I don't like a million. Okay, so to give you an idea, so let me help you out with this a little bit. I'm going to visually wave my hands for a little bit if I can bring my thing over here. So here's the thing with FileMaker. Is that every time, like Christian, go over here and find a pop-up list, any sort of pop-up, like if you have a typewriter here. Click that for me. Just pop that.
I got you. Just
there you go. Just hold there. So that right there could be a table in your FileMaker system. Okay, it could be a table because when you do a pop-up list, the pop-up list can be generated a couple different ways. It could just be a block of text that you put in, or it could be the values out of another table. So you could have a table that just drives a single value list. So you can have tables created down to very small levels. So FM Starting Point, which is a pretty serious tool, you could break out vendors, you could break out a couple additional things, but the number of tables it has in it collectively is around 30, okay? Salesforce, a basic installation of Salesforce was 230 tables about. That's because they don't group anything together at all. It's called normalization, where you have things that are kind of grouped together, maybe improperly, or denormalized. It's this technical relational term, but it's breaking everything out into its own table. The problem is that you don't want a billion tables, because if you have to run and this is part of this old school thinking about FileMaker, right? Old school thinking about FileMaker, and that is the idea that for every table you have, if you're going to move the data from one file from file A to file B, you have to do an import script to import each table. Import, 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 import. And if you have 230 of those, and you have 230 imports that you have to do. Now, starting with FileMaker 17, there's the data migration tool, which allows you to more easily move it. So it's more acceptable to have a bunch of tables, right? FileMaker slowly but surely adds the features that we ask them to do that. I said FileMaker Claris, which is that basically a department within Apple for all practical purposes. They're in an Apple building now. So they basically are slow, but they actually end up adding the features we need. And so they add this feature so we can move the data very rapidly from file A to file B, assuming the two files are similar structure. Like if you have starting point, it's live. You have a new version of starting point. You want to move the data, a couple command lines, or use a tool. It moves over there within seconds. So it's less of a hassle now. But the end of the day is every time you create a table, then you have to manage it in the relationship graph, and you want to make sure that you're managing a relationship graph using Anchor Buoy for performance benefit. If you don't know what that's about, we have an upcoming live stream on that. It's also in our paid video course at fmtrain.tv. You go to fmtrain.tv and you press the subscriptions. So we have 90 hours of FileMaker training. It's animated. It's really, really good. So there's a lot of considerations, because the more tables you're creating, the more relationships you're creating, and then potentially having FileMaker jump to those relationships. So there's two sides of, it's dangerous to overdo it. At the same time, if you underdo it, then you have the worst case is that if you took every little thing and made a table for it, and you had 500 tables. The opposite behavior is everything in one table, a flat file, which makes for a giant mess too. And so you have to find kind of this in between for yourself, right? So if you have a table over that you have a pop-up that you really want to actively manage, it's going to change all the time, it probably should be a table. Define it as a table. And then when you set this up in FileMaker, you say generate this pop-up, get the data from that table, right? Makes sense? So it's kind of a interesting question, Christian, because if people want to give me the exact number, I want 12.5 tables, right? That's the correct answer. And the problem is the answer is based upon your skills and your understanding of your needs, right? Does that make sense? Because your understanding of what your needs are will change. Amy Shealy is here, and I guarantee from the time she started her business to wherever she is now, and even probably going forward, she derives new understanding of how her business works or how it might work better. And she's like, well, crap, I need my database to do this other stuff, right? And then so she waves her hands, and then the people that work for her build that theoretically, right? Christian, you there?
The last couple of years with one of my main clients, we've actually spent more time on supporting tables than the main modules talking about that. We had a lot of drop-down lists that were text-based. And one of the things I have learned, when I have new coaching customers, one of the very frequent things that people ask for me in early sessions is, hey, I have this drop-down list that's like for a payment type, and we don't call this thing anymore. We call it this. But I have all this stuff that broke. Can you help me? And so now when I build drop-downs with people, one of the things I try to figure out is, are there going to be actions based on the things in that drop-down list? Because if there are, then it's very likely that one day, however those words are spelled, is going to change. And so I prefer to have another table with IDs so that I can refer to the ID and let somebody change the words or make the field active or inactive so that we can remove something but not destroy historical records. And Richard, something maybe you can speak to, this has come up now a couple times with some of our coaches, is they've gone to help someone build these supporting tables, and the client said, I don't want that, because every table you add to my database is going to make it slower. I think we're better off to just keep as few tables as possible, because that's going to be the fastest database I'm going to have.
But that's not necessarily a true statement at all, right? So
yeah. And so that's one thing that comes up too, where it's like, yeah, less tables can be faster, but one giant bloated table isn't faster either. The last time an engineer said that to me, I'm a little bit of a smart sometimes. I said, well, I think unless you took it out, it was in our book. The fastest a FileMaker file ever is.
Oh no, it's still in there.
You create the new button. And from that moment forward, everything is downhill. But it's downhill relative to what you're doing. And Nick's whole lean design is this idea of how do you build things as lean as possible, and making extra support tables that have very few fields in them isn't an issue. So whoever had asked the question, what are too few fields in a table? I have lots and lots of tables in a few of my customers' files that have very few things in it. They have a name, an ID, is it active, and then a thing to have it show on the value list or not.
So let's talk about that real quick. So we'll explore this for a moment. It's a good topic to have. So I'm looking at your screen over here. This is a classic case of do I build a table or do I not, right? Phone 1, phone 2. And in our core systems, at FM starting in finished goods, where we manage all the memberships, so you folks get newsletters from me, probably more than you want, but you get these newsletters, and we track email 1, email 2, and email 3 for each person. Technically, I could build a table. Okay, I could build a table, and it could have unlimited numbers of emails for you. But the question, what does that allow me to do? It allows me to support bad behavior by people. I have people literally who every time they want to download something from me use a different email. And so I had a gentleman the other day with 12 emails, and he was all offended that when we would email him, we wouldn't reference his subscription. I said, well, it's referenced on this other email over here, not on the other, because the system has no idea who you are. So we start consolidating them together. I said, what's your main email? Well, I only have this one main email. Then why haven't you been using that? Well, so you have this whole business conversation that goes on, and then what do you do with 3 or 4 or 5 phone numbers, or 2 or 3 or 4 emails? And do you really want to support those? Because if you do put them in another table, then you have to get at them through a relationship whenever you want them, right? And so it's one of those. It's a great example. So if you were in Salesforce, absolutely it would be a separate table, no question about it. That's the proper textbook. We're at school. I got my tie on. I got to put on a clip-on tie here. The professor says that if you can't have repeated data like that, so it must be separated in a different table. And yes, but driving 55 miles an hour on a 4-lane freeway in the middle of the desert in the middle of the night when no one's around really hurts my head. I'd rather go 60, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, right? So the question is, that's the technical definition of what it should be, but it might be safe to go 75 in the middle of the desert when no one's around on a freeway, right? Yes? Straight line? Yes? By the way, I should give you tips. Don't pass cops, right? You're going fast on the freeway, you see a cop, don't pass him, just to explain to them that you're going really fast. They very much dislike that, for those of you wondering about that. I've tried that. They were very unhappy with me, so...
So maybe moving on to the next topic. This one's actually it's a short one. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it, but it's useful. I've seen it various times, and I think it's useful to bring up. And I put down naming conventions, but that's not even necessarily quite right. I'll give an example of a client I had many years ago to elaborate on this. He was new to FileMaker, so this is understandable. In his table, he would put the prefix of the table. So in contacts, every single field started with CON_, and then he would abbreviate the word of the field. And I was coaching with him, and this was extremely difficult because I know most of us know exactly what fields a table are coming from because you have to select that table. But when you want to find a field, you start to type it. And so we had to have to get 4 characters in before we're actually writing the name of the field. And then in his industry, if you weren't familiar with the terminology, the abbreviations made it, at least for me, impossible to understand what virtually any of the fields actually meant. They might as well have been in a foreign language. And so when I did coaching with him and things were broken, I had to ask him, hey, whatever this is, can you go show it to me? And there was really no gain from abbreviating these. Now, again, with all rules, there's exceptions. I'm not saying you can never abbreviate anything. But I've found, at least when I'm writing variables or field names, I say exactly what it is. And barring spelling errors, which is my kryptonite, to me, this has been most useful because when you come back to a script later, it's really nice to know exactly what that thing is. And for those that I see doing these abbreviations on things, I just think that it makes your database more difficult to use. And on that same note, I was talking to Calvin about this the other day. Names also matter because they tell us important information, even if they're not functional. And the examples I would give on this are relationship names, value list names, frankly, even things like layout names. And so what has happened to me, I've either done it myself or I've had clients do it, is when they're naming a buoy and they get to the relationship part, they don't type the right thing. And so when I'm looking through the graph, I'll see pipe ID underscore invoice and assume that the nature of that relationship is based on ID invoice, because I'm not going to sit and go back there every single time and click on that relationship. And so if you don't name things properly, you can actually create confusion for yourself. So if a value list doesn't correctly describe what it is, or a layout doesn't describe what it is, or you abbreviate things, you create this layer of confusion in the database. And so I'm actually quite particular when I'm copying buoys in the back end to really sit and make sure, oh, you know what, we forgot to change the letter on that, or we forgot to add this name there. Let's go do it, because otherwise we're going to think later that that's the preferences table when it's the estimates table because we forgot to change the word. The database doesn't care, but the human operator is going to get tripped up on that. Richard, is there anything you want to add on that yourself, or anything you've seen?
On the naming, no, I'm very big on being very explicit in naming. People can always say, because I'm almost talking slang and smacking the thing and telling people to don't touch this or I'll break your fingers, that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So Kyle kind of, always count on Kyle to kind of redirect the conversation. So Kyle was talking about painting, I think loosely painting yourself into a corner in a way with performance. So let me address this briefly here. So in our FileMaker training, right? So I'm going to put Christian over here. I'm going to minimize this for a second. So in our FileMaker training, wherever it went, let me bring this up. So if you go to if you go to our website and you take a look at the, you download the training player app. If you could post the player app, we could put that out again. But in the paid training for FileMaker Pro 19, or the FileMaker Pro 2021 platform training, we're trying to figure out what Claris is naming their products, and they don't really tell us, so we kind of figure it out the hard way. But we've redone the performance training in there, and in there is this issue of churn. And it's a new terminology. It's something that hasn't really existed prior because the way FileMaker has been worked on and made better and faster. But if you have a lot of on-screen calculations, even if all the data is down from the server on your local computer, FileMaker still has to churn and generate that data. And so it gets into an area where you don't put live calculations on screen. You have the calculations basically pre-cached. So if I go back over here to Discord and take a look at this, basically, where did that chart go? It went somewhere here. Where does the... right here. So this is a kind of a chart so this is a screenshot from Kyle. And Kyle had calculation. And I'm assuming that each one of these is all sorts of stored totals and local data, things like that. And the rub is with this is that to display this, it has to do all these calculations in real time. And that is that's painting yourself into a corner with performance, but that frankly is a normal progression for people who are beginners, who are Megans, to move up to intermediate level developers. They're going to start to see these problems, and Kyle solved it by putting in HTML, which is, I guess, something that Kyle would do. That, in my mind, that is not the correct answer. I mean, it worked for Kyle because Kyle has whatever other skill sets that he has under his hood. But the basic is that the same with HTML is you want the data cached. You want the data cached. That's what HTML is. It's cached data. If you build number fields or text fields for all these items and have them pre-calculated, when you display them, there is no delay. It doesn't have to calculate anything. It's all pre-figured out. And so that is the idea of caching the data in advance. Nick will probably discuss that during reporting, but it becomes an important issue where if to display this, I mean, it's firing calculation on every box and doing totaling. That could be really slow, but that's what happens as you build more and more sophisticated solutions. Then you have to figure out how to overcome that performance, and that is its own way. Kind of you painted yourself into a corner. Now you need to kind of clean up the performance. So it's not so much that it's ugly or even that it's structured incorrectly. It's just that you're displaying too many calculations at one time, and these calculations need to be set by a script in most cases into cached data. As cache means it's already calculated, it's already sitting there, it's a text or number field, and to display it is almost no effort. FileMaker can display text and number fields that are without calculation almost instantaneously. It'd be very, very fast. So it's a good point on that. And of course, then there's a book that's being written here, and I can read through that at some point. Christian, what else do you have?
So I got one other item. I'll stop sharing my screen for now. Wave my hands in the air.
Okay, put your face on there. There you go.
Oh, is it sharing? There it is. Okay. So the last topic, and actually I'm going to use Kyle's here because this is a good one, and I think this definitely ties into the whole beginner versus experienced engineer. And so yesterday I mentioned, a lot of the times we get ourselves into this corner because we confront a problem that we don't know how to solve, but we use FileMaker and we find a solution that gets us kind of trapped. And so a conversation I have with all of my coaches about various things is thinking about not only the initial solution, that is what it took to build, but the support. Assuming that Kyle's layout that he showed us didn't have a performance issue, I see another problem there, which is you realize after you built it that you have to change the conditional formatting on each of those items. And you have X number of them to go and make changes to. And so this is really where I think the people can break from being that kind of a novice screen engineer to being more advanced. Is if you I had a situation with Michael recently where we had a portal that did one thing and we needed a portal that did another thing. And so Michael's solution, and this is typical of juniors, is like, well, maybe what we'll do is we'll put a slide panel, we'll build the exact same portal, but we'll make slight changes to it. And that would solve his problem. But I said, Michael, what are you going to do when they want you to make changes to the portal in the future? You just duplicated all of your work by 2. And so when I'm writing scripts, when I'm making layouts, when I'm doing objects and calculations, this is something I'm very sensitive to. I can solve the problem initially without much of an issue, but what I've done is created myself exponential future work on supporting those things. So when you come down to a situation of, oh, I can solve this by having duplicate layout objects that are almost identical but slightly different, duplicate layouts that are similar but slightly different, all the way down to things like scripts, be very sensitive to that because virtually it's always going to happen that you or your client is going to need the database to change. And so every one of those various things you have is exponential work that you have to sit and support. So that's one of the bigger ones that I think that has gotten me painted into the corner. And I'll come back to a layout that I built years ago and was very proud of the fact that I solved a difficult problem. But now I'm confronted with the fact that I have 15 or 20 conditional formattings on screen that I have to right click and change a calculation on.
Yep. Absolutely. And so the other way of caching that, and Kyle pointed this out, he goes, well, I could do HTML because I'm really great with HTML, blah, blah, blah. When we have a conversation, we assume people don't have like magical hidden secret skill sets. And Kyle says it makes it very simple, blah, 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 blah. Yes, Kyle, it's can I help everyone here? Most people are not you, okay? So once again, this is the Kyle moment. So as much as Kyle is great, Kyle does not reflect the average FileMaker developer. And so once again, this conversation over here about caching, it's one thing to cache the data he's going, but what if I wanted all the conditional formatting in here? You can build the conditional formatting into you can conditionally format the data that's in the text and number fields. You can already have it preloaded in there. So it's already blue and green and purple and backslashed and whatever. That can all be cached. You don't have to do doing tons of conditional formatting on the screen can and will add churn to the process. You can pre-bake that into the data, right? It's not an impossibility. I know that's offensive to some people. Oh, I don't want to put styling into the data, but that's how you can make it fast. So it's written into the field. So FileMaker, all it has to do is display it. Once again, it's the same thing you're doing with HTML. Once again, I'm just trying not to have a class on, because as soon as I go Kyle, oh, Kyle's so brilliant, he does HTML, then people are going to go,
I don't know HTML. Can you explain to me how to do HTML and JavaScript? I don't know how to do JavaScript. Can we do JavaScript?
and we're not doing JavaScript, we're not doing HTML. If you want to learn that, then go see Kyle's training that he's providing to everyone, and he can explain it to you, right? So, but it's one of those sort of things. So a little unwieldy, but I have to explain it. So if you could do it, it's like that line. I can't remember, the basketball player used to say that he was really showing off, and he goes, "It's not showing off if you can do it." Okay, fine, but then you can provide the training on it, because I ain't gonna do it. Right? So it was one of the Leland. I remember Leland we were talking to Leland about his performance tool. He's like, I'm going to do JavaScript training. I'm like, dude, that's great. That's awesome. I will personally buy it, but we're not going to do it because I'm not sure we could ever recoup the investment on it. Like teaching FileMaker developers how to do JavaScript. How many people are going to pay for that? 100, 200 people. You can't make recoup your highly animated edited video training course with 200 people who are going to buy the course. Not possible. So unless you charge $1,000 per person. But remember the other day, it's the running joke about our training. I can't count how many of you actually don't listen to when we talk. Right, you only listen to me in the background. So like you're going to the bathroom, you're cleaning the toilet, you're cleaning the kitchen, whatever you're doing at home. Maybe you're driving really fast, passing cops, and you're listening to us. And I asked a question the other day. I said, I was trying to figure out how much to charge for Nick's training, and one gentleman suggested Nick was worth $25, and I'm like, okay. And then TK goes, well, he's worth $125, which is reasonable. So then we say the training's out there, it's available. We've taken your suggestions under advisement. We had a number of people said, I thought it was going to be $25 because they heard the word Nick and 25 together. And I'm like, you people don't listen. As much as I love you, you don't. Hello, internet world, you don't listen when we talk. Listen. So anyway, I had to explain Nick that he was worth $25. Listen, homeless people around here won't even do stuff for $25, right? So, yeah, I don't, the homeless people in the Bay Area, they expect you to give them hundreds when you they're begging, like, we'll work for food side of the road. And they're like, oh, no, we only take hundreds, right? So, anyway. All right, Christian, what do you got? Anything else, or are we done for the day?
That pretty much covers my list. I mean, the last thing I would add in terms of painting yourself into a corner, you frequently aren't going to know that you put yourself into the corner. I mean, we've given you guys some of the tips to be aware of. I think that the biggest telltale is once you're in the corner and what that looks like. And for me, it's something that Nick had said a while ago, which is if everything is an exception to the rule, then you've got a design issue. And what that is saying is you have found yourself in the corner and you're contorting in all these different ways to deal with the corner that you have put yourself into, rather than stopping for a moment and figuring out if there isn't a different way to get to where you're at. And if you are developing in FileMaker, the time will come when you find yourself in a corner. And if you can recognize that you're there and be humble about it, then you can also figure out how to get yourself out of those corners and learn how to avoid them in the future. So I hope this is helpful to people. It's all generic stuff. We're not telling everyone how to fix these things because, frankly, if we could tell you how to not get into corners and get out of them in 2 hours, I don't think any of us would have our jobs and get paid what we do. That's the whole reason Richard's in here with Nick, an hour a day showing each of these individual places of how you can solve the corner issue.
Yeah. The issue, I think we talked about it yesterday, is your personal attitude about being trapped in the corner. Be aware that one is that your organization's needs will change, or, this is deep, I know most of you missed this, or your understanding of your organization's needs will evolve. Your organization hasn't changed, it's just that you were too stupid the first time to really fully see it. To be honest with you, after 31 years of doing this, I still learn new things at RCC about what the organization kind of needs, and probably needed for a long time, and I was just too stupid not to see it, right? Welcome to there's no CEO boss school out there, right? Unless you happen to be the son of Donald Trump or someone, right? Where your dad's already a CEO or something, and they get to like take you along the way and explain it to you, right? My dad was a civil servant. He was a federal agent, law enforcement, cop, helicopter pilot, general badass. But the point is that he doesn't know shit about managing a company, right? So I didn't have anyone over my shoulder going, "Hey, Richard, you should do this," right? So maybe Amy's got like the guardian godmother teaching her how to do her business. You never know, right? TK, right? How many of you folks are actually running your own business, and who's there to teach you and explain it to you when you realize, oh crap, this is actually how my business works. I had no idea. And it's like, you've been doing it for 10 years. You feel stupid, right?
Hey, real quick, I just noticed that UK Lad had responded to one of the questions, and I wanted to try to adjust this. And so UK Lad is asking, in terms of this not making multiple objects, do you try to make individual scripts that do little things with parameters that kind of tell them what to do? And that is exactly it. So the example I'll try to give you guys on this, when I was new to FileMaker and I had a situation that I had to solve, I would write, and it might be more than one script, but I would more or less write one very unique task or script that solved a very specific problem. But within that script, there was probably repeatable things that over here, I had to solve the same problem. So I'd go back to the first script, I'd take those lines of code, I'd copy and I'd paste them over here. And now I've got two very different scripts, even though they've got overlapping portions. And then I might do that 3 or 4 times. And then one day I realized, oh, I screwed up that one calculation. And now I have to go find every one of those scripts. So instead, what I'll do is I try to have smaller scripts that you give them information to go in like a function, and you get an output on the other side. And so UK Lad, this is exactly, I think, what you're asking there. And it depends, and it takes a lot of practice of how well you can do this. But one of the things that I do now is to use starting point as an example. Estimates and invoices both have their own set of scripts and processes for adding products to them. And when I go in to customize those modules, especially like for this newer client, I will have a single window, a card window that both of those call. They all call the same scripts to get it there, and they all call the same scripts to close it. I even last night realized I was solving a problem where one script was running locally and it had to do 2 steps, and another one was going to PSOS and it would do those same kind of 2 steps. So I took those 2 steps and put them into a single script. And then both of those things can call that script. That means in the future, if that process changes, I have that one location to go and make a change to rather than the 2 of them. So I hope that's helpful in answering that. But think about that when you're writing your script. Someone once said this to me. Think about them like functions. Functions have certain parameters that you send to it, and then they give you a result. And if you can make your scripts bite-sized pieces with inputs and an output, they start becoming like Lego blocks that you can connect to each other rather than this one very unique script that does a great task for you, but really can only do that one thing. And anything that's in it that's repeatable has to be copied and pasted somewhere else. And then if you ever have to change the process or you made a mistake, you've multiplied what you have to do to fix those errors and make the customizations. And that is absolutely something I've both learned in experience in terms of how do you actually make something that does that, but also years later having a client say to me, hey, you know all those email scripts? I don't want it to have this signature on it. And realizing that I had hard-coded those in half a dozen different places rather than having a more unified method of doing it. So it sounds like that answered his question. That's my last tidbit for today.
Yeah, I want to welcome Chris. Chris is there on the Twitch side, and Chris says, I can't count on how often I was in the corner and learned kind of the hard way. Well, listen, this is for, okay, can I help out everyone here just briefly? Hopefully this is like super obvious, but most of us learn the hard way. That's how it is. If you get to come to training like this and it's free, or you go to training it's paid, the whole goal of the training is to cut the corner on how much hard stuff that you have to deal with, right? You're still gonna have to deal with hard stuff. You're gonna get in the corner, but we're trying to give you some ideas. Today is about understanding you've painted yourself in the corner. You've got a problem. All the other training we do all the rest of the days are about how to get out of whatever corner you found yourself in. Different topics: relational design, lean design, Kyle design, special Kyle things, whatever we do with Kyle. But the point is that that's what today is mostly. I think today is mostly yesterday and today is mostly mentally understanding and being prepared to like say, yes, I am faulty. I'm a faulty person, and I didn't do it perfectly the first time. And if anyone could do it perfectly the first time, then I would definitely hire you and then promptly fire you for being the most egotistical person without, relevant bearing in the world. It's like, look at me, I'm so great, I'm perfect, very narcissistic, right? I would be content never to do training again as long as we had other people in the company who would do this every day. Christian could do it, but he's too busy working on projects, right? He'd be much better at this than I am. So my job is just to try to keep the chicken for sure. Keep everyone keep everyone going the same direction, and and dealing with all these personalities. You be like dealing with Nick is like I have to be an agent, like a sports agent, right? Like for Nick, right? Say, how's it going, Nick? You good? Oh, you're good, right? You're the best, man. Get in there and do it. And Nick goes in there and does his thing, right? But you feel like that agent, right? Show me the money, right? Show me the money, right? So, yeah, Jerry Maguire.
One last comment I lied. I got one more tidbit at the beginning of the session. Richard, you were very kind in saying, well, Christian's a real fast learner. And some years ago, I was talking to my dad about this. I actually tell people, I get job interviews, like I'm not actually a fast learner. I learned that about myself in my 20s, and it doesn't mean that I'm dumb. What I have learned about myself is that I'm a rather slow learner, but I master things. And so I struggled greatly the first couple years with FileMaker, trying to understand the relationships. I just couldn't get it, and it made my head hurt so bad. But like any trade, I sat and practiced at it over and over and over again. I wish that we had Nick Hunter's lean design. I had to go figure that stuff out on my own. And now I'm at the other end of it where all of that practice is starting to pay off, and I can master that skill. So I just think it's important to bring up because, if you look at something like I do or Nick or some of our other engineers in here, and you think about like, oh, wow, they're so great in these different ways, I think it's important to understand that I struggle just as much as Trixie probably does on different things. But I stayed up till 3 a.m. many, many, many nights practicing to get better at it. And so just don't give up. Practice and get better.
The answer for Moki real quick, since he just asked the question about licenses, RCC, if you're looking for a volume license like 5 or more, we also sell, we do sell perpetual. So if you can buy either annual from us or perpetual. If you're interested in getting a license and getting a good deal on the license, make sure you reach out to us at support@RC Consulting, and that'll get fast tracked to Ryan, who is our license person. Don't talk to my senior engineers about license. I had an unfortunate moment. The senior engineers, especially the ones that have been around like 15, 20 years, like, I know everything, right? And then they're like, so they call Claris to start negotiating for licenses, and they completely screw everything up because they actually don't know how licensing works anymore because Claris has changed it so much. So if you want to know about licensing, the only 2 people in the company who can actually do it is me and or Ryan Correa. So if you are interested in licensing, you need a good deal, reach out to support@rcconsulting.com, and we will get that connected for you. All right, that's it for today. See ya. Wait a minute, I have to hit, where's my exit music? We need TK exit music, where TK is like rocking it as a stormtrooper. That would be
Did you hear that, TK? We're gonna need that.
I'm gonna work on that. I'll get that going, right?
Guys just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected. The quarterback great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Try to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap, stands in, throws it left for Amendola, reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10, rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.